Hi, everyone.
Good evening.
So this is Writer Speak Wednesday, and we are here to welcome Deshaun Charles Winslow. I'm going to read his bio that he sent us because it's really fun and
Well,
cute.
let me real quick. This is Tiara, by the
Oh,
way.
yeah.
I'm Hudson. We're both MFA students, and now Tiara over here is going to introduce Deshaun.
He's the most important part of the evening tonight, though, of course.
Clearly.
We're his students. We've been with Deshaun, actually, this is our second semester with him, and he's just absolutely fantastic. So here we go. Deshaun Charles Winslow was born and raised in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. At the young and dumb age of 23, having dropped out of college, he moved to New York City with only about $1,000 in the bank and a few $100s of available credit cards. After a few years of living by the seat of his pants, Deshaun returned to school and earned a BFA and MFA in creative writing and an MA in English literature. Deshaun's first novel, In West Mills, received the 2021 Willie Morris Award for Southern Fiction, a 2020 American Book Award, and the 2019 Center for Fiction First Novel Prize. His second novel, Decent People, will be published in early 2023.
And now here's Deshaun.
Yay!
Hi. Thank you so much, Tiara and Hudson. First of all, I just want to thank you all for inviting me to read for Writer Speak Wednesday. It is an honor. I've watched some of them and I'm glad to have been invited. Also, just want to say thanks to Tiara and Hudson for being available this evening to have this conversation with me. I've enjoyed having the two of you in class the past 2 semesters, and I look forward to this conversation. I'm going to read just, just a handful of pages from the first chapter of the novel, because it sort of perfectly introduces readers or potential readers to the main 2 characters, which is Not and Otis Lee. So I'll just begin now. In October of 41, Azalea Center's man told her he was sick and tired of West Mills and of the love affair she was having with Moonshine. Azalea, everyone called her Not, reminded him that she was a grown woman. "Stop telling me how old you is," Pratt said. "Well, I thought maybe you forgot," Not retorted. She was sitting at her kitchen table, pulling bobby pins from her copper red hair. She picked up her glass and finished what was left in it. She had barely set it back on the table when Pratt picked it up and threw it against the wall. He then packed all his clothes in the old suitcase he'd brought when he moved into her little house a few years back. "I'm getting out of here," he affirmed. "Need some help packing?" Not shot back, and she laughed. It wasn't the first time Pratt had packed that ragged bag. He stared at her, frowning. "Drink yourself to death if that's what you want to do." "Go to hell, Pratt." "I'm leaving hell," he yelled. A few days later, Not came home and found a folded note peeping out from under her door. First, she looked down at the signature. When she saw Pratt Shepherd at the bottom, she took a chilled glass from her icebox, poured a drink, and sat down to look over the message. She read most of it. It said that Pratt was at his sister's house, just across the lane. Not wasn't surprised. Pratt's sister and her 2 little girls were the only family he had in West Mills. In the letter, Pratt reminded her that he still loved her, still wanted to marry her, and still wanted to start a family with her. He wrote that he would wait around for just 1 week. Then he was going back home to Tennessee. That's where Not stopped reading. She laughed out loud, tossed the paper on the table, and set a glass down on top of it. Funny, it was usually the books she used to teach her pupils that got the wet glass. Not would be lying if she told anyone that Pratt wasn't a good man. He didn't mind hard work, he picked up after himself, and he kept his body nice and clean. And he knew how to give her joy in bed. But the truth was that Pratt wasn't much fun to her otherwise. He didn't have much to talk about, and he couldn't hold his liquor to save his life. After 2 drinks, Pratt was laid out, spilling over, or both. Not liked men who could match her shot for shot, keep her mind busy when they weren't drunk, and still do all the other things Pratt could do in bed. Aside from all that, her father, she called him Pa, wouldn't like Pratt. If she was ever going to be married, it would have to be to a man her pa loved just as much as she did. Pratt's threat to leave West Mills could not have come with better timing, because Knott's 27th birthday was a week around the corner. When the weekend came, she walked down the lane, 2 houses to the left of her house, to tell her good friend Otis Lee Lovin all about her newfound freedom. And since Knott visited him most Saturday mornings and knew he would be in the kitchen, she didn't bother knocking. "You need to go on over there and fix things up with Pratt," Otis Lee said. "Otherwise, he gonna be on the next thing headed west." Otis Lee set a cup of black coffee on the table in front of Knott. His face was angry looking and peach. He didn't sit down. Just then, his wife, Pep, showed up at the table with a boiled egg and a biscuit, all inside the cracked, sand-colored bowl Knott wished they'd throw away. "Pratt can catch the next thing to hell," Knott replied. Pep pushed the bowl in front of Knott, next to the coffee. She didn't sit down either. Knott looked up at them and wondered what the day's lecture would be about. "Eat," Pep commanded. Even at 7 o'clock in the morning, her face looked full and healthy, as though she had slept on a pillow made of air, not the rough, feather-stuffed pillows Knott used. "I thought I left my mama in a hosky," Knott scoffed. "Y'all got anything I can pour in this coffee? Something size milk, I mean." "Why you so set on being lonely, Knott?" Otis Lee asked. Pep looked down at Otis Lee as though he had gone off script, and he looked up at Pep as if to say, "I couldn't help myself." The way he and Pep stood there, side by side, made them look more like a boy and his mother than a husband and his wife. Why the two of them behaved so much like old people, Knott never understood. They were only 5 years older than she was. For Knott, it was Otis Lee's being happily married, being too short, and the old man ways that ruined the handsomeness she'd seen on him when they'd first met. And that handsomeness, as striking as it was, had never caused the feeling Knott got deep in her stomach when she met a man she wanted to touch or be touched by in the dim light of an oil lamp. "Y'all know he tried to beat me, don't you?" Otis Lee and Pep both sighed at the same time. Knott wondered if they had rehearsed it. "You sit to my table and tell that tale," Otis Lee reproached. Then he began with his "you know good and well this, and you know good and well that." At times like these, Knott had to work hard to keep her cool, because if she didn't, she might tell Otis Lee that if he spent more time worrying about his own life and his own family, he might know that the woman he knew as his mother wasn't. She was kin, but not his mother. If his real mama is anything like mine, better for him if he don't know. Ain't none of my business anyhow. "Tell me one thing," Knott said. "Why y'all always take his side?" "It ain't just about Pratt's side," Otis Lee insisted. "You need to be nicer to everybody around here." Knott heard bits and pieces of what Otis Lee recounted about how her drinking had gotten out of hand, how she seemed to want to be by herself more than anything nowadays, unless she was at Miss Goldie's place, of course. Excuse me. Knott started nibbling on the biscuit and then on the egg, trying not to hear all the things she already knew about herself. Otis Lee turned to Pep and mused. "You remember when she used to go see children and they mamas, Pep? Used to visit people just 'cause she had time. People used to talk so nice about that, Knott. Thought the world of it. Didn't they, Pep?" "Yes, they did," Pep replied. Knott dropped the egg back in the bowl and asked, Ain't I sitting here visiting with y'all right now? Not was certain they had both heard her question, although neither of them responded. Now folks say you show up at the schoolhouse smelling like you bathe in corn liquor, Otis Lee went on. That's about all they saying about you now. What people you talking about anyhow, Otis Lee? Knott said. She took a sip of the coffee. It was weak. What you mean, what people? Y'all ain't got but 300 or 400 folk round here, Knott pointed out, and most of them is white folks who don't know me from a can of bacon grease. Some days you talk like you don't live right here in this town, Pep remarked. Knott couldn't think of anything to say back. She knew that some, if not all, of what Otis Lee was saying was true about people whispering. Many times, Knott had noticed how some of the women stopped talking when she came near them at the general store. And at the schoolhouse, she'd been a bit hurt by how some of the people had seemed as if they didn't want to be seen speaking to her too long when they came to pick up their children. They'd ask how their little ones were doing with their lessons and then hurry off as though Knott had a sickness they didn't want to catch. Thank you.
Yay!
Thank you so
So
much.
much, Sean.
Loved hearing that in your voice. It was funny because even when I was reading the book, I could hear it in your voice as I was reading through it. So it was very nice to hear that match up.
Yeah, I thought it was so interesting too, because I know you, obviously, by taking 2 classes with you, I absolutely could read it in your voice, especially because there's very distinctly Southern characteristics about your characters, of course, but also you still have this amazing way of making it clear who's speaking. So it was never I don't know who's talking right now. So I thought that was amazing.
Thank you.
And I've got some lovely questions here, but I'm going to start off with, because I know you have a furry companion in your room. The rule of Zoom is you have to introduce your pet when they appear. So just preemptive strike, would you mind telling us about your cat?
Yes, my cat is named Umbra. He's about 9 years old. He's my partner's cat first. And then I joined the family, I guess you can say. And he is on the couch sleeping right now, but I don't doubt that he will show up at some point. When he wakes up or enters a room, he announces himself. So it may happen.
Excellent.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Sometimes during class, we see him and he's so cute.
And loud and adorable.
Yeah, yes.
All right. So talking about the book specifically, I wanted to say, I take a moment to say I really appreciate the fact that not only do you have unapologetically queer characters in the story where that's just a facet of who they are with no fuss, but moreover, even though, there's even the main relationship isn't romantic, it's platonic, but between people of the opposite sex.
Mhm.
And so I just wanted to know, how did you settle on this being the trajectory of the story?
So initially, Otis Lee was not one of the main characters at all. The story was all about Knott. And I had wrote a draft where I brought him in as just a neighbor who kind of butts up against her to remind her that she's making bad decisions. And then at some point I said, well, you know what? Maybe I should just let him have more of a spot. I didn't want him to take over, but let him have more of a role in the book. And the next thing I knew, there was this stuff for him to have to deal with too, but it wasn't the original, the original plan. But once I decided that he would have a significant role, I knew what the cliche thing to do would be. And that would be to have them be love interests, have the two of them have an affair, And I said, you know what? I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. My mother had a best friend who was a male. And I'm queer, but I have tons of friends who are women and we've never been intimate, And I was like, this can exist, And so I said, I'm not going to do that cliche thing. I may allow other characters to say, are they fooling around? But I'm going to make it clear that they're not. And there's I don't remember what chapter it's in, but it's at one point when Otis Lee's son basically accuses him of having an affair. And the next time we see Otis Lee, he's making sure Not knows that he loves his wife and that she is the only one for him, you know. And I just kind of wanted to double down on that because I wanted the readers to not read forward thinking that that was going to be what would happen. Yeah. So,
and especially with romance, especially heterosexual romance being so front and center, I so appreciated that about the book.
Yes.
So just wanted to tell you, great job. I love Otis Lee.
Thank you.
All right, I've got a couple of chat questions here. First, we've got, let's see, Yasin, sorry if I didn't say your name right. I apologize, but wants to know what inspired the plot of your story.
Well, the Knots sort of storyline. So Knot is a person, this character is inspired by a person I knew from my childhood named Knot. She was the girlfriend to one of my great uncles. And true, you know, very similar to this character in the book, Knot, the real Knot, did have a drinking problem. And she was, you know, stubborn, but she was well loved and well looked after mostly. But I like to write from a place of what if. And so I thought, and I don't want to spoil the book for people who may want to pick it up later, but I decided to make some things happen in the fictional Knot's life that didn't happen in the real Knot's life. And I just thought, how would a person deal with these sorts of things? Like they're in their early 20s or mid 20s and they're like, I don't want this, I don't want that. I just want to drink, live my life, pay my bills. But when some real life stuff happens and forces you to be like, oh, okay, I guess I don't really get to control that, or, you know, or I didn't control it in that moment, how that can change a person's life. And so that was Knott's, that's why the things that come into Knott's life happened. It was me playing with a real life person's, you know, trajectory. And so with Otis Lee, though, it was a little tougher because he wasn't originally supposed to be like a main character. So it took some time for me to come up with what was his demon. And I just started to pick at stuff from like my family's history, like bits and pieces of, you know, like family folklore, if you will. And I remembered hearing that a great aunt of mine had a child, and I knew who the child was and everything, and that she had asked her sister, you know, to raise the child. And so I said, I'm going to do this thing with Otis Lee, you know, with the whole his sister is really his mom, that sort of thing. But the passing part, you know, with her passing as white, that's kind of from a little bit of family, you know, a little bit of family lore, but also just something that commonly happens in the African American community where someone is biracial, and if they can pass for white, if they could pass for white in the late 1800s, early 20th century, they would, you know, some of them would do that, and they would go move north and stuff to be able to do that successfully. So I was playing with a little bit of family stuff and a little bit of just kind of like African American commonality. Yeah.
Well, that is so interesting to hear about. And thank you so much for such a detailed, thoughtful answer.
Yeah. It made me think like one drop rule and everything when I was reading it. And so it's nice to see that you were thinking of that.
Yeah.
We have another question from Saeed that asks, what was a point of emphasis for your piece? So you can take that question as you will, I think.
Oh, a point of emphasis. I think it's probably the fact, and this is a little bit of a spoiler, but I think it's the fact that a parent, there's different types of parenting, you know. Some people can say, you know what, I know that I'm not cut out to be a full-time parent, but it doesn't mean that I don't want to watch my child or my children from afar and make sure that they are okay, you know. And and I guess the cliche thing would be, I mean, how many movies and books do we read about where a person has a baby and they give it away, and then 20 years later, the child finds them and says, "I know you're my mom, I know you're my dad," and then it all is happily ever after, and they try to pick up this relationship that they didn't have. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to do it exactly that way. And so Not has two children. One of them she does form a relationship with, having given her away. The other one, they don't. So I just wanted to find a balance there. But anyway, I think in terms of the question of emphasis, I just wanted to do something a little different. Everyone is not cut out to be a parent, even when they have children. And I think that people like that shouldn't be shamed, especially in a time period where like birth control wasn't readily available. Can you imagine how many people had kids and never wanted one? And so they shouldn't be shamed for that. Yeah. So I think that's my answer to that question, my best answer.
That's awesome.
That's a really good answer. I love that. All right, now we had here. We're feeling a little unsure about this question because I think you made the comment about not before, but I still think for other characters this works, so I'm going to ask it. They were wondering about how you chose the character names in the book.
Oh, so almost every name is the name of a person that either they were in my life when I was a kid, or they are a family member who was dead long before I even existed. So I think it's a double great grandmother whose name was Penelope. But I had to do some digging to find out her name was Penelope, because on a lot of census records, she was listed as Penny. And the further I went back, I was like, oh, her name is actually Penelope. Penny was the nickname, and so I almost named her Penny in the book, but I have an aunt named Penny, and I was like, I don't want her to think that this is her, So I was like, what's another way to like have a nickname of Penelope? And so I said, okay, Pep, So Not is based on a real character. Otis Lee, that name came from one of my babysitters' husbands was named Otis Lee. Yeah. So Breezy, I knew a man named Cool Breeze, growing up.
Man, you know people with cool names.
Yeah. His nickname was Cool Breeze. And so I used Breezy there. Goldie, the juke joint owner, I knew a lady who went to my church named Miss Goldie Burris. And so I decided to name, but everyone came from my community or census records when I would do like genealogy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it helped me for the people that I did know, it helped me visualize characters. I gave those characters those real people's faces. Helped me to write them. Yeah.
Wow.
Love that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I've got a couple of questions here about your next novel, but I want to ask you a couple more questions about In West Mills first, kind of involving.
Sure.
So because writing a novel can be so daunting, and in case of, In West Mills, we follow multiple generations and increasingly complex events and family trees. What was your process for writing the book as far as all of that? Did you outline first, or did you take a different approach, computer, pen, paper, other?
Yeah, for In West Mills, I did not outline. I did, what I did is I decided kind of early on, I decided how the novel would end. And so some people would say, well, that's a form of outlining because you have to make sure it gets to that point. But I never sat down and wrote out like in chapter 1, this will happen, in chapter 2. I never did that. I kind of I started from the beginning because this was a short story first. It was about a 30-page short story that I decided reluctantly, I decided to expand it into a novel. But yeah, I never sat down and like decided every step of the way, but having it as a short story first allowed me to say, okay, let me take these 30 something pages that I have and just like jump in places and spread out a scene, pop in here, spread out a scene, look at the beginning and see if I would still want that to be the beginning. And then I, of course it changed, but so no, I did not outline this book. I sort of hate when I hear other writers say this, but I kind of let the characters do their own thing, and you'll be surprised when you're writing, if you haven't experienced already, how out of nowhere you'll have a character do something and you'll be like, I didn't plan to do that yesterday, and then that decision it's cause and effect. A lot of it is cause and effect, So no outlining. Or with the first book, no outlining. Second book, yes, we can talk about that when you want.
I love hearing about your process though, and this is how I'm going to plug your class because again, I feel like you have helped me so much trying to figure out how to take things from I'm such a piecemeal like writer that like I constantly have these little bits and bobs everywhere. I even like I took a page out of Paul Harding, our current director's book, and now I have Post-its all over my wall with like character names and things everywhere. But like you have helped me so much try to like figure out and also know that like I don't need to outline. And like hearing that also about this book is super helpful. And so yes, if anyone is looking to add a course, I think that they should definitely check out Deshaun's class because he gives awesome feedback and the workshops are amazing.
Thank you.
Love that plug. You are so good. All right. Now, actually, I'm just curious. So let's see. So basically, I was curious, how did you end up going from, I love the process of hearing how it went from a short story to a novel, because it's kind of like a more complex outline in a sense, if you really want to get super technical about it. I love that idea. My question then is, when it came time, publishing time, how did you find the publisher for the book? How did that process end up going?
So finding the publisher, that happens. I know the sort of like very basic, the agent sends it out to however many editors they think it's a right fit for. They don't just send it to any editor, they send it out. There's a period of time that you wait for them to read it. And that varies. It can be anywhere from a week to 6 months, I think in my case, it was a few weeks, I think, in my case. But so once those editors who are interested tell the agent, hey, I'm interested in this book, then the agent schedules a meeting, a phone call usually, for you and those editors who are interested. And then you talk to them for, I don't know, an hour or whatever, and just kind of talk about the book. And I think basically the purpose of that conversation is to gauge if the two of you have similar visions for the book, or if the editor's vision is pretty much the same as yours, they just want to do some refining, and tightening up. I think this didn't happen to me, but I think an example of an experience that could go left is when the editor is like, I love this book, but I have all these ideas for changes, and the changes turn it into another novel. That's an example of one that would go badly. But yeah, that's kind of how it works. The agent sends it out, drums up interest, and then people who want to acquire it, they submit a bid, basically. Yeah, and if there's multiple editors, there's generally an auction, and then sometimes there are people who there's one editor who likes it so much that they don't want any other editors to see it, and they'll say, here's this dollar amount, please take it off the table. So it can go various ways. Yeah.
Oh, and let me ask, you're mentioning the agent a lot. How did you end up meeting your agent?
I first met my agent at Iowa at my MFA program. Some of them come out and do talks and do one-on-one meetings. So I met him there, PJ Mark at J and Chloe and Nesbitt. Met him there at Iowa. I think it was in 2016. And I sent him an early draft of the manuscript. It was, at that point, it was still pretty short, because I was still, even though I had written a novel, I still didn't really like want to be a novel writer. So I was like, oh, I'm just gonna do this short 130 something page thing, And so he read it and was like, this is great, but let me know when it's finished, And I was like, it is finished. I'm going to talk to other agents, And so I queried a whole bunch of agents who all rejected me, most of them for the same reason. And so finally decided, okay, I need to actually double the size of this thing. And so I did that, sent it back to him, and then he was like, now we can talk.
I actually have a sincere question. So I find this myself when I'm writing, is if I have a longer, more ambitious thing in mind, I tend to feel fatigued thinking about the process of writing something longer and expanding on it. How did you overcome that when you had something that you felt good about? How did you find places that you felt good expanding it without coming up against that kind of fatigue?
Yeah, a lot of it came down because I had gotten so many rejections and I wanted to publish the book. A lot of it was just saying, okay, Deshawn, if people are saying that there is much room for expansion here, then just slow down. Just like read the book one chapter at a time, like, because I wasn't able to write every day anyway. And so I would say, okay, today I get to write. Let me just read chapter 1 slowly. And as I would read it, there may be a scene that I had, that may last half a page. And I just say, this scene can actually be expanded. Like there's more that these characters can talk about. And not just like superfluous talking, like plot-driven, character-driven information can be exchanged in this conversation. So just expand it, And then I would do that, and then a flashback idea would come, to accompany that scene. And I just did that like every chapter. And the next thing I knew, the thing was an additional 100 pages longer,
Love it.
Yeah.
And that note, we've talked about expanding it. I'm curious, as you were going through the process with the editor and everything, there's that term, kill your darlings, for, you have something that you really like in your manuscript, but it doesn't ultimately work. Did you have to kill any darlings in West Mills?
Yeah, I killed a darling, not a character so much though. It was, there were, I think maybe 4 letters in the novel that I had. The Essie/Ellen character, she was writing letters to Otis Lee, but not sending them. And as you know, in the end of the novel, he gets them all. But throughout the novel, I had sprinkled about 4 or 5 of the letters, and so that we would just see her writing them and collecting them. And so my editor at the time was like, I love these letters, but I just don't know that we need them, And so for a while, I said, nope. They stay. And then she checked in with me just one more time when we were kind of finished. And I thought, I thought about it, and I got a couple of opinions from friends, and they varied because people like the letters, but a couple of my friends said, I see what she means. They're not, the readers don't really need to read 4 letters. Like at the end, they'll read 1 and they can just understand what the other ones would be about, And so I said, you know what? All right, there's a darling I'll kill, the letters. But I don't think I'm pretty certain I didn't chop any characters that I loved. Yeah.
Awesome. Oh, I love that. All right. So since it's a popular question, would you mind telling us a little bit about your next book?
Sure. So the next book is called Decent People, and it's a murder mystery. I mean, that sounds a little simplistic, but I don't want to give too much away, but what I'll say is there's a trio of siblings. They are enigmatic. They live in the corner of town, and they are somewhat wealthy for the time period and for where they live. They are considered to be wealthy, because the oldest of the three is a doctor, and she is the only Black doctor around. And so they turn up dead. And there are three people who had beefs with them, and pretty public beefs, for various reasons. And I will spoil a little bit and say that one of the beefs has to do with homophobia. Yeah, that's probably like the central beef, because two of the beefs, yeah, I'm saying beef a lot, but two of those beefs are connected, So anyway, there is a character named Joe. Joe is originally from the town, has recently moved back to marry her longtime childhood sweetheart. And these characters are in their 60s. So these people aren't, very, very young. And Joe just wants to retire and have a good life with her man. But guess what? Her man is one of the suspects. Everyone thinks that he did it. And she feels pretty certain that he's innocent. So she is on a mission to basically clear his name. But there's a struggle because she has to make sure that she's trying to clear his name for the right reasons, because he's actually innocent, not just because she wants a happy life with him. And there are signs that point to him possibly being guilty. Yeah.
I love a good murder mystery, so I'm pretty excited about that. Oh my gosh. So I know that you have a good background with film and all that stuff, so I've got to ask, what are some pieces of media, film, book, whatever, that have had a deep and profound influence on you?
So I think probably my favorite film is probably The Color Purple, Steven Spielberg's adaptation of Alice Walker's The Color Purple. Just because those characters and those actors just remind me so much of like the people I grew up, listening to, watching, observing, learning from. And as I got older and would watch the movie, then I could pay attention and notice cinematography, So anyway, that's the top of the list. Gosh, Hudson, that's a tough one because I can't think of a lot right off the top of my head. I love the movie Ghost as well. Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore.
The thing.
Yeah, right. Just because it's just, that that movie just has there's so much love and there's a lot of humor in that movie as well. Sister Act, part 1 and 2, and not just the comedy.
Here.
Right?
We're seeing the Goldberg connection going on.
Oh my God. Yeah. I hadn't even thought about that. So it must be movies with Whoopi Goldberg. I'm seriously, I hadn't even thought of that. But wow.
We need to have like a Whoopi Goldberg day now where you just like watch a ton of movies.
Just binge. Yeah. That's all I can think of top of my head.
Love it. Speaking of lovely, lovely media things, I'm curious, is there anything you're watching, reading, or playing recently?
Let's see. I just recently bought, and forgive me, I don't know the author's name, but I bought a collection of short stories called Blank Pages. Gosh, I don't know his name because frankly, I bought the book on sale. The store was closing, and I just bought a bunch of short story collections. But I'm enjoying it. I know that he was shortlisted for a Booker Prize some years ago.
Is it Bernard
Uh,
McLaverty?
Yes, yes.
Googled.
Thank
Google
you.
Sensei,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah. I just finished reading A Slow Burning Fire by Paula Hawkins. Enjoyed that. I'm doing a lot of, I'm working with a lot of students. So my pleasure reading is generally happens during when the semesters are off. Yeah. But those are the two most recent.
Clearly, reading our stuff is a pleasure, obviously.
I know since we're both being workshop tomorrow.
Right.
So I'm going back to the thing one more time, and I'm definitely putting you on the spot, but I'm very prepared for this.
Cool.
What is hands down the worst movie you've ever seen, and what made it so bad?
Worst movie.
Ooh, or worst book you've ever read.
Okay, so worst movie. Oh my God, I can't think of one. I'm sorry. I know that there are tons. Now, in terms of worst books, I don't have a title, but I'll just say that it's been a few years ago, but just like buying one of those romance novels out of like Walmart,
Yeah.
and because like the synopsis is really good and stuff, and you read like 40 pages and it's just like, oh no, I can't do it. And I'm not a literary snob, but but I was like, I can't do these Walmart romances.
So I'm gonna nudge the chat. So if you have any questions, let me know. I've got this question for you, sir. And that is, what is the best piece of advice you've gotten in writing and also in life?
So for writing, they are kind of the same. For writing, Ayanna Mathis said something to me along the lines of, because she was my second workshop leader when I was in my MFA, and the first piece that I had put up for workshop, the language was bad. Like I just had bad verbs and stuff, and she was honest with me, and she said, I feel like you aren't writing the way you want to write. She said, I feel like you're trying to give the piece a voice that you think is acceptable, and she said, like, try rewriting this piece in the voice you really, really want to write it in. So what she was essentially saying was like, be true to yourself in writing, but I took that advice, and I mean, I was already in my 30s and should have already known to thine own self be true. But she just kind of reminded me, to like, go back to what works for you, do what works for you. And that helped me with In West Mills, because that piece that she read was like some other story,
Yeah.
So yeah, that was some of the best advice that I could think of right now. I'm sure my father's always said, always keep $1 in your pocket. And I didn't start listening to that until I was like 30. But now, but he was right, Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love that. That is amazing to hear.
I have a question.
Oh, you have a question?
I do.
right.
So as you just mentioned, like for your second book, I noticed that there's kind of that you tend to write in the past, right? From generations in the past. Why is that? Why are you interested in like 1940s?
It's interesting. I was going to say, it was interesting that you seem to really highlight older characters, which is something that I don't feel like I see as often.
Definitely.
Like, you didn't shy away from writing older characters in West Mills, and you didn't, you're mentioning older characters here, and I love that.
I think I have a bit of an obsession with the past, not just my past, but I'm curious about what life was like for people like before I came along, and how normal it was. Like, we look at a film that's set in 1920 and think it's so fascinating. How did they wear those clothes? It looks uncomfortable. How did they survive summers without AC and that sort of thing? But there was no AC, and so they didn't think about it. It was just hot, and they fanned themselves, But anyway, I think I'm just fascinated with like the way life was before I came along. And I think the reason why I tend to highlight middle-aged characters or older is because my parents, especially my mother, she taught me at a young age that like old people will take care of you, And so my babysitters were always like really old. Like sometimes they probably shouldn't have been taking care of kids, because if they had fallen, what would we have done at age 3, But I grew up like one of my grandmother's first cousins was my babysitter for years. It was always old women. And so I think I just have a respect, and it's not that I don't respect like people my age or people who are younger, but I'm just really fascinated by like, especially older Black women. I'm really like curious about how they move through the world in the past and today, because ageism is real. I'm not, I'm 42 and I'm already starting to see signs of ageism, and I'm a male, So just like imagine what a Black woman at age 60 is going through, So anyway, that's why. Yeah, I do want to try. The second book is moved a little bit more in time. It's in the 70s, so we're getting a little closer to. And maybe with the third book idea that I have, I'm thinking 1990s. Yeah,
Excellent.
but also a lot of it has to do with plot and cell phones.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's a solid reason.
Yeah, but eventually I'm going to have a cell phone or a beeper in my work.
Just get the clunky 90s cell phone.
Right.
Well, if he has the 90s piece, he's going to have to.
And I'm so curious, by the way, what is the third novel looking like? What's going on there?
It's so, I really don't know. I have 2 short stories that are linked, and I'm thinking of maybe, and these are unpublished works. These are things that I wrote years ago when I first started writing. And I think maybe I'll just try to make a novel out of it, or a linked short story collection or something like that. But I'm thinking like a family, so that so that people reappear in other people's stories. Yeah.
Oh, I love
something
things like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes, so I don't have any other questions so far, but I will ask you one more thing related to writing.
Sure.
So just to give us an idea, all of us humble listeners, when writing these books, how long did it take you to write these books?
Let's see. So in West Mills, from the time I decided to expand the story to the time I decided to send it out to agents, I would say that was probably about, if I'm remembering correctly, maybe 6 months. But that's because it was short. The first draft was short, and I wasn't being patient, Once I decided to expand it, then I would say like an additional year. Yeah. So I would just say a year and a half. We can round it up to 2. We can round it up to 2.
Is that to make me feel better about myself, or?
Yeah. The second book, I think I got serious about it because I had a lot of false starts with that one. I got serious about it in the fall of 2020. Wrote a first draft that semester, gave it to my editor. She was like, nope. And so then I revised. It wasn't a nope, like throw the whole thing away. It was like, use all of this, but I think the structure isn't working. So I think I took like another 5 months to revise. The second book happened a little more quickly. Yeah, a little more quickly. But start to finish, from the time I started it to the time we finished editing. Now that was 2 years, because I think it had a lot, because of COVID and, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, I can write fairly quickly, but then editing can be slower, Yeah.
Yeah.
I can get a first draft down quickly. Yeah.
I envy the ability to just be able to spill it out on the page.
Know. Me and my little Post-its over here really envy that.
I try not to edit as I write. I learned that with the first book I don't edit as I write. I like to just put a whole bunch of mess on the page, then start from the beginning and read through and take out, add in, take out, add in. It works for me. Yeah.
Excellent advice.
Yeah, I feel like it's similar in the way, Deshawn, because like when I'm trying to write something, I have like a cinematic picture of it. And so I'm like writing it up, but if it's not turning out in text the way it is in my head, I try to just get over it, but it's so hard though.
I hear you.
Oh my gosh. All right. So no more questions from the chat so far. So I will end on the question that Tiara is going to slap me for asking when this ends. So would you say not was naughty?
Oh my God.
She was.
And put a little pep into Pep Step, all that stuff.
That was 2.
And the breeze blew Breezy away, right?
Yeah.
Now there's 3.
Breezy was feeling real breezy about the whole thing.
Oh my gosh. Now you're both just collaborating and conspiring against
on that
me.
note, so clearly, thank you for talking with us tonight.
Yes,
it was a great
so
conversation.
much.
You are a delight.
For having me.
So easy to talk to.
Thank you. Y'all too. Have a good night. Thanks everyone for showing up.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.